They felt that if they would fill up the slope, fill it up, pack it up again, and then they would start shoring up as they would start clearing the slope again to go down and shore it up a lot better, and there would be no more cave-ins. They could get to what the one man said would be the bodies. And that really hit the fan, because then Joe Fellon, the brother of Davy Fellon, said, "You guys just want to bury them, and we're not going to allow that," he says. "I know they're alive." He said, "Davy's a smart miner. He knows how to handle himself if there's a cave-in along the line." And Joe went down to the court. He went down to the court in Schuylkill County in Pottsville, and they got a stay on anybody attempting to fill in this slope and try to do it that way.
Like great Paul Cerula, who was a fantastic newsman. I think he set the standard for everybody around here, and that was a program that you were involved. Of course, everyone, Don Pachence, I doubt he needs any intro, but that was from the program called Our History that you hosted. And you also hosted the program 20 years ago or so that was the interview with Hank Throne.
I think 1993, it was 30th anniversary of the Sheppton Mine Disaster. Very interesting time. Hank Throne was, of course, still alive, and Fellon had passed away.
Right.
And what you're seeing snippets is the only remaining interview with Hank Throne that's around.
Right, and we're going to see extensive snippets of that in the next few minutes. In fact, in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to play a 5-minute piece, because you asked him a couple of general questions, and he said exactly what had happened then and what caused the cave-in and all that. This is one of those events, though, Don, that if you were around back then, you kind of remember where you were. Do you?
Yes, I was around, and thanks to Paul Cerula, who was working as the news director, reporter. He was a jack of all trades. You know how it was at WAZL.
Yeah.
He did everything. He was an on-air guy.
Right.
And as soon as that happened, he was out there for the entire time, the full 2 weeks. And he got me on the site because they had National Guard people, police. You couldn't just walk on the site. And Paul got me on. It was absolutely theatrical.
Yeah.
They had pipe scaffolding around the perimeter. Was
that for the news media? Because I thought I remember Paul telling me they built scaffolding just for the media to keep them out of everybody's hair.
Absolutely right. That's where the reporters, the news media, the television cameras, the video cameras are all on the scaffolding. And when you went in there, it was surreal. All these huge drilling machines, bulldozers, working feverishly. It really was something to behold. It probably was, if you'll recall, you were just a young guy.
I'll tell you what, I do kind of remember a little bit. I was, I think, 4. And my father was one of those guys who wanted to go see what was going on.
Hard to get.
And I remember we drove down. He was working for a frame service company at that point. And we drove down, and we couldn't get very far. There were a lot of people. I remember tripping over a big cable as a little kid and cutting my knee. And we couldn't get close enough to see what was going on. But there were thousands of people there.
Right. It was hard to believe. It probably was the biggest story ever to hit Hazleton. Then and even now.
Yeah, probably. There was an earlier mine disaster that the old time, I was going to mention this later on in the show anyway, Jeansville in 1891. The old timers who were around at Shepton said this reminds them of Jeansville, where 4 guys were stuck underground for 20 days, not 5, and they managed to survive. But yeah, during our lifetimes, this probably is the biggest story that happened here. Right?
And it was international. People all over the world were concerned about it.
I was telling our GM here, Barry J.S., the other day that I have at home, but I was unable to find, a documentary that was done for CBS on this, hosted by, I think it was E.G. Marshall. The program was called Survival. And they did a half-hour on this like the following year. This aired in the spring or summer of 1964. And I wasn't able to find it, so I was going to see if we could borrow some stuff from it and get permission from CBS, if they even still own the copyright. They may not anymore.
Well, there were a tremendous amount of celebrities. And when I say celebrities, people that we saw every day on the news. I can't remember everybody's name, but I do remember Robert Goralski. He was here. He stayed here. He went to the Ovalon for dinner. He was there almost every night, and so we had a lot of those TV broadcasters that were on the news every night. staying in Hazleton.
And I remember the one scene from that survival when you pan it, you see the an ABC network camera, then a Channel 6, which was WFIL TV at that time, all lined up in a row on this.
And Paul Cerula was doing live broadcasts for a lot of stations throughout the United States.
A lot of stuff got picked up nationwide by NBC.
Yep. Yeah. And Paul was doing a lot of that because he was at the site. Yeah. And of course, I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but Elwood Tito was really the engineer he was the engineer for WAZL.
Right.
And he had a TV store in addition to that. And Elwood was the one who put the radio transmitters down the hole. He was the one who did all that.
That's what it was. When you mentioned that name, something triggered that, he had been involved. Let's watch this one clip, and then we'll go to break. And then when we come back, Joe will have weather wisdom. And then Don and I will be back. We've got a lot more clips and interviews to show you over the next 40 minutes or so as we remember Shepton 50 years after the fact. This is the first series of questions that you opened that program with, called Straight Talk, as it was in those days. Back in 92 or 93. With Hank Throne.
Hank, let me take you back to August 13th, 1963. It's early in the morning and you're about to go to work. Tell us what kind of work you were doing and where the job was located.
Well, I lived in Hazleton, and it was about 8 o'clock in the morning. I got in my car and I was going to Shepton. At 8:30 we started. Went in, got my lamp, put it on. But Davey and Bova and myself, we got into the gunboat. We went down inside.
Oh, hold on a second. When you say Davey and Bova, you were with Dave Fellon.
Dave Fellon.
And Lou Bova.
Lou Bova.
Okay, and we're going down into the mine shaft. Okay. How deep were you?
That was 380 feet. 380
feet deep.
Yeah.
Okay, then it was a normal day. You were working for several hours?
It was just a normal, regular day, like you go in, and we loaded 1, 2, 3 cars. So I said to Davey, I said, well, next car, I had to go outside. So I said I was going to go out. And he said, I'll load 1 more car.
So then something terrifying happened, a miner's nightmare.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
So then I said, okay, we'll load that car. And that car got halfway up and boom, everything broke loose. So Davey was on this side with me, and Bova was on the side at the wrapper. And I don't know, everything went down. Bang, and the props came down, and we're hiding into this monkey that we had on the side.
Okay, you're using some miner's terms that I'm sure I'm not familiar with, and maybe our viewers are not. The first thing you did, you ran for safety, and you jumped to the side.
Right into the monkey.
And a monkey, what is a monkey?
A monkey is something that you dig out on the side of the shaft that you could hide in.
Okay.
Because the pitch is so heavy that when the gunboat goes up, that the coal would fall down and would hit you. So you'd be on that side, and Bova didn't have nothing to worry because he was on the inside of the gangway.
Okay, but Lou Bova was not where you and Davey were.
He was on the other side.
On the other side.
On the other side of the shaft.
Okay, now the shaft caved in, filled up with coal, and what did you do then? What was the next thing that you did? Were you looking for another way out?
Well, yeah, we kept looking around, and then Davey said to me, Hank, he said, this looks like it. This is it. I said, no, it might be for you, but not for me. So I kept moving, we kept hollering for Bova and
well, did you try to dig your way out? Were you?
Yeah, we're trying to go, but props are so heavy you couldn't. And I moved 1 piece of coal, and as I did, it came down and cracked me over here. So I said, boy, our lights went out. So I said to Davey, I said, is my nose off, or is it still on, or what? And then I felt something running around in my mouth. My front teeth got knocked out.
Oh, brother.
Moving around, and as we kept going and going, we kept hollering for Bova, no answer. I guess, well, he must have went way back in more.
But he was on the other side of the shaft.
But he was on the other side of the shaft.
Now, did you, the papers indicated that you and Davey Fellon decided to try to dig yourself out through the slope, the shaft, the way you came into the mine. Is that correct? Were you trying to do that?
We tried to do it, but we had no tools, so everything that we touched was so heavy you couldn't just move it.
Okay, so now you're waiting for a rescue.
Now we're waiting, so we figured outside, we kept rapping on the rail.
Was that an SOS, a kind of SOS?
Just to give the guy outside that we're okay. So then we figured, well, we better not hit too much on it. If the wires are loose anywhere, we'll get electrocuted because it's going to come right down with the 440 line. And we're waiting and waiting and waiting. It's just like time, it's be like in this room here.
But you thought you would be rescued,
Yeah, well, I figured, well, so what? It's all that stuff come down. We're going to get out one way or the other.
Did you think they were going to come down through the slope? That was the normal way to do it, right?
That's the way we figured. But as it turned out, they said it was too much gas coming up.
Well, then you're there for how many days down in the
We're there
monkey?
for 5 days.
Okay, after a while, it was determined on the surface, you had no way of knowing this, that they were going to go down through the slope, but your wives didn't want that slope backfilled, and they decided to drill a borehole,
Yes.
a 6-inch hole.
6-inch hole.
Out of desperation, because quite frankly, everybody thought you were dead up on the surface. And out of desperation, they dig a 6-inch hole, and tell us what happened.
Well, they said they had a lot of holes dug, but we didn't hear any of them.
Okay.
So I don't know, I guess maybe it was going on to that was 6, 7, 8, maybe the 10th, 11th day. So we hear something coming down and they're hollering. So I said, boy, that's bova. So I said to Davey, I said, look, all this time we were monkeying around here and he finally answers it.
So you didn't think it was from the surface?
No, we didn't know
thought it was
from
bova on the other side of the shaft?
Yeah, the first voice you would hear, you figure, well, that's bova. Oh, where were you, bova? Where were you? And then somebody said, it's not bova.
Well, what was your reaction when you found out, when you finally figured out that this 6-inch hole was from the surface?
I said, boy, it's really something. I said, somebody's coming. I thought they were coming down the shaft.
Down
way.
the shaft.
So I never know, that they're, so no matter way you look at it, the shaft's here. So if a hole would come down that way, you still figure they were coming up over this stuff.
What did you do for food and water before they started to send things down
Well,
to
we
you?
got a pipe, and we stuck a cable in it and stuffed like coal in it and put dirt in it. And there was another pipe laying there, and you could hear like running water. So we run it down and pull it up, but that was sulfur water.
Sulfur water, right.
So the first time we tasted, boy, it tasted pretty bad. So then we were taking bark from the trees, from the props. There was mold in that, but we just put it on our lips to keep them wet. As long as you kept your lips wet, from swelling, they'd be okay.
So you were drinking sulfur water.
Drinking sulfur water.
And eating bark after.
Yeah, bark.
Did you have your lunch bucket there? Didn't you?
Well, my lunch bucket was right there, but I couldn't get at it. I said, boy, look at that. I had steak sandwich, and I couldn't even get to it. So the props were so big, I couldn't get it. And it was still there. When we came up, it was still there.
You mentioned that you thought you were in the darkness. You thought you were moving around. But
Yeah.
when the smoke cleared and you finally saw where you were, you ended up.
Same place.
You ended up in the very same place.
It's just like if you get stuck somewhere and put a chain on it, and you put in your car in gear and raise the back end up, you're not going nowhere. So
What was the first thing you asked for when you realized that they dug this 6-inch hole from the surface? What's the first thing you asked for?
The first thing I asked for, I wanted a cigar.
Hank Throne talking to Don Pachence back in about 1992 or 93 or so. First of all, that was done at the Eckley Miners Village, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, at the museum.
How did you get him? Because I know for years the Standard Speaker had tried to talk to him, and he just kept saying over and over again, he didn't want to. Oh, I turned my mic off because I was talking before. As I was saying, the speaker, when I worked at the speaker, I know the stories were that they had tried for years to get him to talk about looking back. He didn't want anything to do with it anymore. How'd you get him?
Well, I was a friend with Gary Capice, Pat Capice's son, who was an attorney in Texas, and he had signed Hank Throne to a contract. He was an attorney that did a lot of work with movies and television. He was a producer as well as an attorney. And he had signed him to a contract. They wanted to do a movie about the Sheppton Mine Disaster. And so I talked to him. I said, I've been trying to get him on my show. What do you think? He says, well, if you give him $50, he'll do it. It's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I gave him $50 and he came on the show.
$50, you got a
exclusive,
historic interview
right.
that 50 years from now somebody's going to be looking back and playing on the 100th anniversary.
Isn't that it? It's really interesting.
There were a bunch of stories that floated around at that time, and you would know more about them than I do. Is it true that one of the drills or drill bits was flown up by multi-billionaire Howard Hughes? Is that true?
That's true.
It is?
That's true. At least that's what.
How did he hear of
That's
it?
what
How did
Paul
he
told
know
me.
it?
And it was an international story, don't forget. And they needed a huge drill bit. They needed like a 16-inch drill bit. And Hughes Drill Company was one of the few companies in the world that had a bit that size. So he flew it up, and that's according to Paul now. And Paul knew practically. He knew everything.
If he says it, I believe it.
And yes, so it was that Howard Hughes was involved. Hard to believe.
Wow. There was also a little intrigue here. Paul had mentioned in the bump in that they at first considered this a recovery mission, that they didn't think anybody was still alive.
Right.
And it was Davy Fellon's brother who was saying, "You're not burying my brother alive down there," or anything like that. And then there was also little intrigue because, well, the Bureau of Mines got involved. The UMW, the United Mine Workers, you would have kind of expected them to get involved, except this was exactly the kind of mine the UMW didn't want to exist. It was what's called a wildcat, right?
A non-union wildcat mine. But they ultimately got involved. But you're right. It was much later. It was much later.
And the safety, how much safety inspections, how much safety in mines spun out of that? Because even at that time, if you're 100 years ago, in the 1880s, 1890s, there were 1,500 miners a year killed in cave-ins. By the time we get to the 60s, there's one every 10 years or so. So there already had been some, some safety advancement.
I don't know the specifics of it, but I know new legislation was adopted after that mine cave-in.
Uh-huh.
I know that.
Let's take a listen. We're just talking about drilling, and the first question was exactly where to drill. What turned out to be his final broadcast interview, Paul Cerullo. I asked him that question back in 2007. This was his answer.
Well, at first, the first day or so, they didn't exactly know where to drill.
Uh-huh.
There was all kinds of talk and like measurements going on. And would you believe there was an engineer or two from Penn State University at University Park?
Yeah.
They were there, and they practically called the shot of where the drill should go first.
Now, they had no idea whether the three were alive or dead at that time, right?
There was nothing. Nobody knew anything.
What he also told me was that engineer decided drill here, but they were kind of.
They were guessing.
I hated to use the word guessing. I was going to say sort of estimating based on some maps they had that they knew weren't accurate.
Old maps. They were absolutely guessing. And I think, I don't know if you have it or not, but when Tarone told me that he and Fellon were in the so-called monkey, which was about the size of a refrigerator, and that 6-inch drill bit came down directly on top of them, you know that had to be a lot of luck.
Yeah.
Right on top of them. That's what he said.
When we come back, I hadn't seen this show since it aired, so when I watched it all the way through the other night, it was the first time I had actually seen it in 20 years. I think I recorded it when you aired it the first time. I probably have it at home on some VHS tape. You asked him about a story that has always floated around, and he confirmed that it happened. We're going to play network TV here and let them hang. This is what's called a cliffhanger, folks. We'll get to that when we come back.
The one voice that I think became more predominant in going against that was Davy's brother, Joe. He said, no, I know they're alive. They know they're real miners. They will survive. And it got into a hassle legally. They had to go to court while they were drilling 6-inch holes at the beginning. And then they got an order not to backfill, explore by using drills.
Okay, so whose idea? Was Joe Fellon's idea to try the 6-inch hole technique?
He sort of pushed for that. It was a combination. Some engineers were there, the State Mines Department. The independent miners at first were the ones on the site, but then the United Mine Workers of America sent their delegates there.
It's a little haggling, huh?
It got quite controversial, and then there was a consensus to do this, and they brought the drills in.
Okay, who decided, though? I mean, it's a big surface. They're 308 feet below the surface. Who decided drill it right here?
Well, I believe Joe, if my memory serves me, Joe had some maps of their workings. Davy's brother or someone did. And Gene Gibbons also, the co-owner of the mine.
Wasn't Gordon Smith involved, the Deputy Secretary of Mines?
And then the Deputy Secretary of Mines, Gordon Smith.
That's you talking to Paul Cerullo on that same program with Hank Throne.
Still a guess, L.A. They were guessing.
Yeah.
They were guessing.
Now, there's been a lot of odd stories that have floated around here. One of them was that Throne and Fellon had seen a vision against the wall and against the coal that they were looking at, in effect the wall. There's a name for it, and I don't remember what it is. And you asked him about that, and we're going to play the answer in a second here, where they said they did in fact see a vision. As an interviewer, when you asked that question, did you think, oh boy, this is one of these crazy stories that is floated around, and just by asking it, I'm going to give it credibility it may not deserve?
Yeah, I was concerned. We're talking about Pope John Paul,
I think it was Pope John the 23rd.
John the 23rd.
Yeah.
It was John the 23rd, who had died a few months prior to the cave-in. And you got to remember, it was pitch black down there. Pitch black, no light at all. They had no light at all. They didn't know where they were. They couldn't see anything in front of them. And the story was that they both saw the Pope, but never spoke to each other about seeing the hallucination. Mm-hmm. That's what Tarone told me. So we have to believe what Tarone told me.
Right.
Tarone said they didn't speak to each other. He thought it was just some guy, in his words, in fancy clothes. Some guy in fancy clothes. Felon was Catholic. He knew it was the Pope. When they come out and they go to the hospital, the old state hospital, Tarone sees a picture of the Pope on the wall, and he says, "That's the guy that I saw in the mine." Now, he claims they didn't collaborate.
Right.
That it was all independent. So we have to believe Hank Tarone.
I'm going to play this clip for you from your show in a second, but he at one point tells you he had never seen the Pope before.
That's right.
My understanding is that he was not a religious man until after all this happened. Is that right?
That's absolutely true. He admits that. And in fact, he was involved in founding the Living Savior Church, which is on Broad Street next to what was the old Carmen's restaurant.
Uh-huh.
So he became religious afterwards.
Let's watch this clip. This is Don asking Hank Tarone about the vision they saw while they were underground.
One of the most interesting things, Hank, is the visions that you and Davy had in the mine. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, in front of me, this appeared a full vision of this man. So I said to Davy, I said, what is that? So Davy's there looking, and I'm looking. He said, looks like some kind of thing from some holy vision thing. And I said, I never seen it before. Then he had like all red and these big velvet things coming
Wearing
around.
a cross?
And a cross. And he had his hat cocked in the back here. And then there was a cross alongside him that had a hook that came down this way, and then around, then over this way, and then around. That was there until the time we came out.
Was that illuminating the area?
That cross, when that cross came, it lit up that we could see.
This face later turned out to be whom?
Pope.
The Pope.
Yeah.
And are you saying that face and that body was there from the time you went into the mine until the time that you were rescued?
The time everything came down on us that we could, we got settled, and all at once we seen that vision on that wall.
A lot of people, that's a remarkable story. A lot of people have poo-pooed that story, said it was a double hallucination, that you were making the story up. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I know what I seen, and Davy's seen it. And I'm the only one here now that could back up that statement, but if Davy was here, he'd back the same words that I'm saying. The Pope was there, and that cross was there, and that's all I could...
And you didn't know it was the Pope until you got out of the hole.
I got out of the hole.
Somebody showed you a picture, is that
of him
correct?
in the hospital. But before they asked in the hospital, he said, how was he dressed? And I said the color of his clothing, it was just on the wall, the same as it was on that picture there. And he said, well, you've seen the Pope then.
All right, Hank Tarone, talking to you 20 years ago about that.
Wow.
That's an odd... Apparently, your reactions to some of his reactions were like, because apparently there have been slight variations in that story every time he told it.
That's right. It changed a little bit, but he stood by the fact that he saw... when I say man with fancy clothes, I mean, I drove him from Hazleton over to the Eckley Miners Village, so he told me a lot in the car.
Uh-huh.
And he said it was, as far as I was concerned, just some guy in fancy clothes. He said, I saw the cross, but it was a guy in fancy clothes.
Too bad. This is something you and I, as interviewers over the years, some of the best conversations you have with guests aren't on the air. They're during the commercial breaks or the drive over or whatever. Let's watch one more clip. This is Paul Cerula talking to you about what happened. They got them out. It was something like 1 o'clock in the morning, right?
Right. And it was on television, believe it or not.
And Paul was also there at the time it happened. So you asked him, what was the reaction when they came out? This is what he told you.
Hank, you weren't there to hear this. You were rushed to the hospital. But when Davy was coming up, he was singing "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain."
Yeah, I heard that on tape.
in big voice, and everybody burst into laughter.
Describe the scene when Hank came up first. Describe the scene when Hank came up on the
surface. It was a Hollywood set. To accommodate the news media, they built scaffolding, like a big set, big platform. Cameras shooting down, lights all over, tent, state police there, ambulance, and this helicopter. Dan Flood sent a helicopter up.
To take them to the hospital.
They had it timed up, and this helicopter, well, they timed it, the time it would take from there, they landed on the Elks Club parking lot, and an ambulance there to take him over to the Hazelton General Hospital.
So, Davey, when you came out of the hole, you didn't realize the scope of this operation. You didn't see much.
No, I didn't see much.
You passed out. So you didn't realize how many people were involved.
No,
in the rescue.
I didn't know how many was there or nothing. Just as soon as the air hit you, just knocked you right up.
He was immediately examined by a doctor as they were taking him over on a stretcher. And speaking about examinations, one of the idiosyncrasies of this whole thing was a guy came on the scene earlier in the operation, claiming he was a survival expert doctor. And here he was a fake. He said he was a Marine doctor.
One of many interesting sidelights.
He had a stethoscope around. Everybody believed him. I mean, he was dressed, you know, and they found out later that he was a fake.
Well,
every disaster, there's something like that happens.
A lot of little sidebars. I remember my good friend Mike Melfi, who was selling at the time, and you're talking a long time ago, 50 years ago, he was selling cigarettes for Chesterfield. And they had just come out with a new cigarette called Lark. And they were in those little packs where you had three cigarettes in a pack.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know whether I could get him on the site so he could hand out all these samples to all the people, which I did. Which I did. I was able to get him on the site, and he passed out samples to all the workers, and he got a nice bonus from Chesterfield for doing that.
He did.
Because Lark came out in 1963.
We're running out of time here, but unfortunately, they never found Lou Bower's body. There is a small memorial there to him. But Throne and Felon, you told me, and I didn't know this, that Throne actually went back in the mines later on.
Yes, he worked as a bartender for a while, like a celebrity bartender. But then he went back to the mines, I think in the Nanticoke area.
They never parlayed this into big dollars. Today,
they would have been exactly.
Yeah.
I know Marty Cohn represented either Felon or Throne or both of them, but they never were able to ink a book deal or a movie or anything like that. They made some money, but certainly not a lot of money to retire on.
That's it. We're out of time. Thank you so much for coming in.
You
got to do this more often. Drop in once in a while during the week. I like this. This is good. Joe will wrap it up when we come back. It's Tom McGay on WILN.